I woke up that Tuesday morning in August to the sound of heavy machinery grinding right outside my bedroom window in Gilbert, Arizona, and knew immediately that something was terribly wrong. My name is Franklin Vance, and I had lived in my house on Saguaro Ridge Drive for exactly 3 years. I bought the property specifically because it sat on 2 acres of land, giving me plenty of space and privacy from the cookie-cutter subdivisions that were popping up everywhere around the Phoenix metro area. The extra lot next to my house was technically part of my property, a wide strip of desert landscape that I had kept natural, with the occasional palo verde tree and clusters of calla cactus dotting the rust-colored earth. I threw on a pair of jeans and a t-shirt, not even bothering with shoes as I stormed out my front door. What I saw made my blood run cold. A concrete mixer truck was parked on my vacant lot, and workers were already pouring foundation while a small crane positioned steel beams. The skeletal frame of what looked like a small building was taking shape right there on my property. "Hey," I shouted, marching across the gravel. "What the hell is going on here?" A foreman in a yellow hard hat looked up from his clipboard. "HOA construction project. We are building a guardhouse for the neighborhood entrance." "This is my land," I said, my voice rising. "You can't just build on my property without permission." The foreman shrugged. "Take it up with the HOA. I just go where they tell me." I pulled out my phone and called the first number I could find for the Saguaro Ridge Homeowners Association. A woman answered on the third ring with a syrupy, sweet voice that immediately set my teeth on edge. "Saguaro Ridge HOA, this is Patricia speaking. How may I help you?" "This is Franklin Vance from 4782 Saguaro Ridge Drive. There are construction workers on my property right now, and I need this stopped immediately." "Oh, Mr. Vance," Patricia said, her voice shifting to something condescending. "Yes, we sent out a notice about the guardhouse construction 3 weeks ago. It is all perfectly legal. The HOA board voted and approved it." "I don't care what you approved," I said through clenched teeth. "This is my private property. You don't have the right to build anything on it." "Actually, Mr. Vance, if you had read your HOA bylaws carefully when you purchased your home, you would know that the association reserves certain rights for community improvements. The guardhouse will enhance security and property values for everyone. I want to speak to whoever is in charge." "Right now." "That would be our HOA president, Mrs. Sharon Kemper. She is actually on site supervising the construction. I will let her know you are concerned." I hung up and looked around for someone who might be this Sharon person. I spotted a woman in her late 40s standing near the concrete mixer, wearing white capri pants and a bright pink polo shirt despite the scorching Arizona heat. Her blonde hair was cut in that aggressive bob that seemed to be the official hairstyle of difficult middle-aged women everywhere. She was gesturing animatedly at the workers while holding a rolled-up set of blueprints. "Sharon Kemper," I called out as I approached. She turned and looked me up and down with barely disguised disdain. "You must be Mr. Vance. Patricia just called. I understand you have some concerns." "Concerns? You are building on my property without permission. This is illegal." Sharon smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Mr. Vance, I don't think you understand how HOAs work. When you purchased your home, you agreed to the covenants, conditions, and restrictions. The association has the authority to make improvements for the common good of the community." "Not on private property you don't," I shot back. "I own this lot. I have the deed. You have no right to build here." She unrolled the blueprints and pointed to a highlighted section. "According to the survey we had done, this land falls within the common area easement outlined in the original development plans from 2008. "That is impossible. I had my own survey done when I bought the place. This is my land, free and clear." Sharon's expression hardened. Well, our survey says otherwise. And frankly, Mr. Vance, this guardhouse is going forward whether you like it or not. It was approved by a majority vote of the board, and we have already spent nearly $40,000 on permits and materials. We are adding a beautiful entrance feature that will make this neighborhood the envy of Gilbert. I am calling my lawyer, I said. You do that, Sharon replied. But I should warn you that fighting the HOA is expensive and ultimately futile. We have a legal fund specifically for situations like this. How deep are your pockets, Mr. Vance? I turned and walked back to my house, my hands shaking with rage. This could not be happening. I had specifically chosen a property with extra land to avoid this kind of suburban nightmare. I had heard horror stories about HOAs, but I had thought the Saguaro Ridge Association was relatively hands-off. In 3 years, they had never bothered me about anything more serious than keeping my garbage cans out of sight. Back inside, I immediately called my real estate attorney, Marcus Chen, who had handled my property purchase. He listened quietly as I explained the situation. You have your property survey and deed handy? Marcus asked. Yes, everything is in my file cabinet. Hold on. I put him on speaker and pulled out the folder containing all my closing documents. What am I looking for? The legal description and the survey map. We need to verify the exact boundaries of your property. I spread the survey map on my kitchen table. The boundaries were clearly marked, and the vacant lot where construction was happening was definitely within my property lines. Marcus, it is definitely my land. No question about it. Okay, that is good. Now I need you to look at your HOA documents. There should be a section about easements and common areas. I found my copy of the CC and Articus and flipped through the dense legal language. After several minutes, I found the section Marcus was asking about. It says the HOA has easements for utilities and maintenance access, but nothing about building permanent structures on private property. Perfect. That is what I thought. Listen, Franklin, what they are doing is almost certainly illegal. No HOA has the right to construct a building on your private property without your explicit consent and proper compensation. This is a clear case of trespassing and property rights violation. So what do I do? First, I am going to draft a cease and desist letter right now. I will have it hand-delivered to the HOA board and the construction company within 2 hours. Second, we are going to file for an emergency injunction to stop the construction immediately. Can you take some photos and video of what they are doing? Absolutely. Good. Document everything. I will also need a copy of the HOA's survey if you can get it. We need to see what they are basing their claim on. I spent the next hour taking detailed photos and video of the construction site, making sure to capture the workers, equipment, and the partially completed foundation. I also walked the perimeter of my property, taking pictures of the survey markers that had been placed when I bought the house. Around noon, a process server showed up and delivered Marcus's cease and desist letter to Sharon, who was still on site. I watched from my front porch as she read it, her face turning red. She crumpled the letter and threw it on the ground before storming to her Mercedes SUV and speeding away. But the construction did not stop. The workers kept pouring concrete and erecting the frame of the guardhouse. I called Marcus back. They are ignoring the cease and desist, I said. I am not surprised. We have a court date tomorrow morning for the injunction hearing. In the meantime, I have also filed a police report on your behalf for trespassing and property damage. You might want to call the non-emergency line and get an officer out there to document what is happening. I followed his advice and called the Gilbert Police Department. An officer arrived about 45 minutes later. Officer Rodriguez was a young guy, probably in his late 20s, and he looked genuinely confused as I explained the situation. "So let me get this straight," he said, making notes. "The HOA is building this structure on your property without permission." "That is correct. I have the deed and survey proving this is my land." He walked over to the construction site and spoke with the foreman, then came back to where I was standing. "The foreman says he was hired by the HOA and told this was association property. He had no idea there was a dispute." "Can you make them stop?" Officer Rodriguez shook his head. "This is really a civil matter, not a criminal one. You need to handle it through the courts. I can file a report documenting what is happening, but I cannot order them to stop unless there is a clear criminal violation. They are trespassing on my property." "I understand, but the HOA is claiming they have the right to be here. That is a dispute that has to be settled by a judge. I am sorry I cannot be more helpful." After the officer left, I sat on my front porch and watched the construction continue. By the end of the day, they had poured a complete concrete foundation and erected the steel frame for what looked like a small security booth with a covered overhang. The structure was maybe 12 feet by 8 feet, just large enough for a guard to sit inside and check vehicles entering the neighborhood. That night, I barely slept. I kept running through scenarios in my mind, getting angrier with each passing hour. This was my property. I had worked hard to afford this place, and now some power-hungry HOA president thought she could just take it from me. The next morning, I met Marcus at the Maricopa County Superior Court downtown. We were there for the emergency injunction hearing. Sharon Kemper was already in the courtroom with her own attorney, a slick-looking guy in an expensive suit named Bradley Thornton. Judge Margaret HSU presided over the hearing. She was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s who listened carefully as both sides presented their arguments. Marcus went first, laying out the facts clearly. "Your Honor, this is a straightforward case of property rights violation. Mr. Vance owns the land in question, as evidenced by his deed and property survey. The HOA has no legal right to construct any structure on his private property without his consent." Bradley Thornton stood up, all confidence and smiles. "Your Honor, the Saguaro Ridge HOA disputes the property boundaries. According to our survey, conducted by a licensed surveyor just last month, the land in question falls within the common area easement that was established when the development was originally platted in 2008. All homeowners, including Mr. Vance, agreed to these easements when they purchased their properties." "You have this survey with you?" Judge HSU asked. "Yes, Your Honor." Bradley pulled out a document and handed copies to the judge and to Marcus. I leaned over to look at the survey Marcus was holding. It showed property lines that were different from my own survey, with the disputed lot falling just outside my boundaries. "Your Honor," Marcus said, "this survey appears to have been created specifically for this dispute. My client had a licensed survey done at the time of purchase 3 years ago, and it clearly shows the land belongs to him. The county property records also reflect this." Judge HSU studied both surveys carefully. "Mr. Thornton, when was your survey conducted?" "July 15th of this year, Your Honor." "And Mr. Chen, when was your client's survey done?" "June 2023, at the time of purchase." The judge nodded slowly. "This is indeed a disputed property boundary issue. However, Mr. Thornton, your clients commenced construction on disputed land without first resolving the boundary question through proper legal channels. That shows a reckless disregard for Mr. Vance's potential property rights." "Your Honor, the HOA board acted in good faith based on their survey and legal advice." "Perhaps," Judge HSU said, But good faith does not excuse starting a construction project on potentially private property without a clear legal determination. I am granting the emergency injunction. All construction must cease immediately until this boundary dispute is resolved. I am also ordering both parties to hire an independent surveyor, agreed upon by both sides, to conduct a definitive survey of the property in question. We will reconvene in 2 weeks to review those findings. It was a partial victory, but at least the construction had to stop. As we left the courtroom, Sharon Kemper shot me a look of pure hatred. "This isn't over," she hissed as she walked past. Over the next 2 weeks, the independent surveyor conducted his work. His name was Robert Martinez, and he had been practicing in Arizona for over 30 years. Both sides had agreed to hire him, and his findings would be considered definitive by the court. During this time, I did some digging into the HOA and Sharon Kemper specifically. What I found was disturbing. Sharon had been the HOA president for 6 years, and during that time, she had ruled the association with an iron fist. There were dozens of complaints filed against her with the Arizona Department of Real Estate, which oversees HOAs in the state. Homeowners accused her of arbitrary fines, harassment, and abuse of power. I also discovered that Sharon's husband, Gerald Kemper, owned a construction company. And guess which company had been hired to build the Guardhouse? Kemper Construction LLC. The more I dug, the more it became clear that this whole Guardhouse project was likely a scheme to funnel HOA money into Sharon's family business. When we returned to court 2 weeks later, Robert Martinez presented his findings. He had reviewed all the historical records, resurveyed the entire area using GPS technology, and compared his results to the original development plat from 2008. "Your Honor," Martinez said, "based on my comprehensive survey, I can state with certainty that the land in question is private property owned by Mr. Franklin Vance. The property boundaries shown on his 2023 survey are accurate. The survey provided by the HOA contains several errors in the measurements and incorrectly interprets the original plat map." Judge HSU looked at Bradley Thornton. "Mr. Thornton, do you wish to dispute these findings?" Bradley looked uncomfortable. He whispered with Sharon for a moment, then stood. "Your Honor, we would like to request time to have our own expert review Mr. Martinez's work." "No," the judge said flatly. Both parties agreed that Mr. Martinez's findings would be definitive. "I am ruling that the land belongs to Mr. Vance, and the HOA has been trespassing on his property. The injunction is now permanent. The HOA must remove all construction materials and restore the land to its original condition at their own expense." Sharon stood up, her face red. "This is ridiculous. We spent $40,000 on this project." "Mrs. Kemper, sit down," Judge HSU said sharply. "Your association chose to begin construction on disputed land without proper verification. That was a costly mistake, but it is not this court's problem. Mr. Chen, please prepare an order reflecting this ruling, including the requirement for the HOA to restore the property and compensate Mr. Vance for his legal fees." Over the next week, I watched with satisfaction as workers from a demolition company came to remove the guardhouse structure. It had been nearly complete, with walls, a roof, and even windows installed. Now it was being torn down piece by piece, but Sharon was not done fighting. She began a campaign of harassment against me that was almost impressive in its petness. Suddenly, I was receiving violation notices for everything imaginable. My grass was supposedly too long, even though I kept it trimmed. My house needed repainting, even though I had painted it the year before. My mailbox was the wrong color. My outdoor light fixtures violated the architectural guidelines. Each violation came with a fine of $250. Within 2 weeks, the HOA claimed I owed them over $3,000 in fines. I forwarded every notice to Marcus, who was building a case for harassment. But Sharon escalated things even further. She convinced the HOA board to place a lien on my property for the unpaid fines. This meant I could not sell or refinance my house until the lien was resolved. I was beyond angry now. This woman was trying to ruin my life because she had lost a legal battle that she had started. I decided it was time to fight back harder. I contacted the Arizona Department of Real Estate and filed a formal complaint against Sharon Kemper and the Saguaro Ridge HOA board. I detailed everything: the illegal construction, the harassment, the bogus fines, and my suspicion that the Guardhouse contract was a scheme to enrich her husband's company. I also started attending HOA board meetings, which were open to all homeowners. The meetings were held monthly at the community clubhouse, a bland stucco building near the neighborhood pool. At my first meeting in September, I was shocked to see how few people attended. Besides the 5 board members and Sharon, there were only 3 other homeowners present. Sharon ran the meeting like a dictator, barely allowing anyone else to speak. When we got to the public comment section, I raised my hand. "Yes, Mr. Vance," Sharon said coldly. "You have 3 minutes." I stood up. "I want to address the Guardhouse project." The HOA spent $40,000 on an illegal construction project, and now homeowners' money is being wasted on demolition and legal fees. I think the board needs to explain how this happened and who authorized it. The board voted unanimously to approve the project, Sharon said. It was based on professional survey work and legal advice. Unfortunately, the court disagreed with our interpretation. Did the board know that Kemper Construction, owned by your husband, was awarded the contract? A murmur went through the small crowd. Apparently, this was news to some people. That is a matter of public record, Sharon said defensively. And Kemper Construction submitted the lowest bid. Everything was done properly. Except for the part where you built on my private property, I said. Your 3 minutes are up, Mr. Vance. Please sit down. But I could see I had planted a seed of doubt. One of the other board members, a man named Tom Rivera, looked uncomfortable. After the meeting, Tom approached me in the parking lot. "Mr. Vance, can I talk to you for a minute?" "Sure." I voted for the Guardhouse project because Sharon presented it as something the community needed for security. She said she had verified that the land was HOA property. I had no idea about the connection to her husband's company until you just mentioned it. Did the board see multiple bids? Tom shook his head. Sharon said only one company responded to the request for proposals. Now I am wondering if she even sent out a proper RFP. You should request documentation of the bidding process. I will. And Mr. Vance, I am sorry about what happened. This is not how the HOA should operate. Over the next few weeks, Tom started asking questions at board meetings, and other homeowners began paying attention. Word spread through the neighborhood about what had happened, and suddenly the monthly meetings were packed with angry residents demanding answers. At the October meeting, nearly 50 homeowners showed up. The small clubhouse meeting room was standing room only. A woman I recognized from 3 streets over stood up during public comment. "I want to know why our HOA fees went up 20% this year when we are supposedly in good financial shape." Sharon shuffled through some papers. The increase was necessary to cover rising costs for landscaping and maintenance. "But I have been reviewing the financial statements," the woman continued. "They are incredibly vague. Just line items like contracted services and community improvements with no detail. Where is our money actually going? Financial statements are available to any homeowner who requests them, Sharon said. I did request them. What I got was worthless. I want detailed accounting. Another homeowner stood up. I have been researching Arizona HOA law, and I discovered that we have the right to recall board members with a petition signed by 40% of homeowners. I am starting that process tonight for Sharon Kemper. The room erupted in applause. Sharon's face turned purple. This meeting is out of order, she shouted, banging a gavel. Everyone needs to calm down. But the homeowners were done being calm. Person after person stood up to voice complaints about Sharon's leadership. Stories of harassment, arbitrary fines, and ignored maintenance requests poured out. It turned out I was not the only person she had targeted. Meanwhile, the Arizona Department of Real Estate was conducting their investigation. In late October, I received a call from an investigator named Lisa Palmer. Mr. Vance, I wanted to update you on our investigation. We have found several violations of Arizona HOA regulations. The board did not follow proper procedures for the Guardhouse project, including failing to obtain homeowner approval for a major capital expenditure. We are also investigating the contract award to Kemper Construction. What happens now? We will be issuing a formal report with our findings. The HOA will be required to take corrective action, which may include financial penalties and changes to the board structure. If we find evidence of fraud or embezzlement, we will refer the matter to law enforcement. This was good news, but I still had the problem of the lien on my property and the thousands in bogus fines. Marcus filed a motion to have the lien removed and the fines dismissed based on harassment. In early November, we were back in court. This time, the HOA was represented by a different attorney. Bradley Thornton had apparently dropped them as a client, probably because he realized they were a sinking ship. The new attorney, a tired-looking woman named Jennifer Walsh, barely put up a fight. Your Honor, the HOA agrees to remove the lien and dismiss all fines against Mr. Vance issued after the Guardhouse dispute began. Judge HSU nodded. That is appropriate, but I am also ordering the HOA to pay Mr. Vance's legal fees for this motion, as the fines were clearly retaliatory. After the hearing, Jennifer pulled me aside. Mr. Vance, off the record, you should know that the HOA's finances are a mess. I have been reviewing the books as part of my representation, and there are significant irregularities. I have advised the board to hire a forensic accountant. Irregularities like what? I cannot get into specifics, but let us just say that a lot of money is unaccounted for. If I were you, I would make sure the Department of Real Estate investigation is thorough. By mid-November, the recall petition had gathered enough signatures to trigger a special election. Sharon fought it every step of the way, claiming the petition was invalid for various technical reasons, but the Department of Real Estate sided with the homeowners and ordered the election to proceed. The special election was held on a Saturday in early December at the clubhouse. Nearly 200 homeowners turned out to vote, which was unprecedented for the neighborhood. The result was overwhelming. Sharon was recalled by a vote of 187 to 12. Two other board members who had been loyal to her also lost their seats. A new board was elected, led by Tom Rivera as president. One of their first acts was to hire the forensic accountant that Jennifer Walsh had recommended. The accountant's report, delivered in January, was devastating. Over the past 6 years, Sharon had systematically stolen approximately $230,000 from the HOA. She had done it through fake vendor invoices, inflated contracts to her husband's company, and direct transfers to personal accounts that she disguised as administrative expenses. The Guardhouse project had been just the latest in a long series of schemes. The actual cost of materials and labor should have been around $25,000, but Sharon had approved $40,000, with the extra $15,000 going into her pocket through inflated invoices. Tom Rivera, as the new HOA president, made the decision to turn the evidence over to the Gilbert Police Department. In early February, detectives showed up at Sharon's house with a warrant for her arrest. I was not there to see it, but my neighbor Carol told me all about it. Apparently, Sharon screamed at the officers that she had done nothing wrong, that she was being persecuted by ungrateful homeowners who did not appreciate all her hard work. She was charged with theft, fraud, and embezzlement. Her husband Gerald was also arrested and charged as an accomplice, since his company had been complicit in the inflated invoicing scheme. The criminal case moved slowly through the system, as these things do. But the HOA's civil case against Sharon and Gerald moved faster. The new board filed a lawsuit to recover the stolen funds, and their attorney was able to freeze the Kempers' assets, including their house and business accounts. Meanwhile, I still had the problem of the demolished guardhouse on my property. The HOA had removed the structure itself, but they had not properly restored the land. There was still a concrete foundation in the ground, along with compacted earth and construction debris. In March, I contacted a restoration company to get an estimate for properly cleaning up the site and returning it to its natural desert landscape. The quote came back at $18,000. This included breaking up and removing the concrete foundation, recontouring the land, and replanting native vegetation. I sent the invoice to Tom Rivera and the new HOA board. To their credit, they did not fight it. The board voted unanimously to pay for the restoration work, acknowledging that the previous board's actions had caused the damage. "Mr. Vance," Tom said when he called to tell me the news, "on behalf of the HOA, I want to apologize for everything you have been through. What Sharon did was unconscionable, and you bore the brunt of it. We are committed to making this right." "I appreciate that, Tom. I know you are not part of the problem. We are also going to make sure that what happened to you never happens to anyone else in this community. We are rewriting the HOA bylaws to add more oversight and transparency. No more unilateral decisions by the president." The restoration work was completed in April. The company did an excellent job, removing every trace of the guardhouse and restoring the natural desert landscape. They even added some additional native plants that attracted hummingbirds and quail. In May, Sharon and Gerald Kemper went to trial. I was called as a witness to testify about the Guardhouse project. The trial lasted 2 weeks, and the prosecution presented overwhelming evidence of the theft scheme. Gerald took a plea deal and agreed to testify against Sharon in exchange for a reduced sentence. He admitted that he had knowingly inflated invoices and kicked back a portion of the money to his wife. Sharon refused to plead guilty and maintained her innocence throughout the trial. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before finding her guilty on all counts. At sentencing in June, Judge Richard Paulson did not hold back. "Mrs. Kemper, you held a position of trust in your community, and you betrayed that trust in the worst possible way. You stole from your neighbors, harassed those who questioned you, and showed no remorse for your actions. This court sentences you to 7 years in the Arizona Department of Corrections." Gerald received 3 years for his role in the scheme. The HOA's civil case resulted in a judgment against the Kempers for the full amount stolen, plus interest and legal fees. Their house was sold to help satisfy the judgment, though the HOA would never recover the full amount. By late summer, Life in the neighborhood had returned to something resembling normal. The new HOA board was functioning well, with regular financial audits and transparent decision-making. They even sent out a newsletter every month detailing how the association's money was being spent. I was sitting on my back porch one evening in August, exactly 1 year after the whole nightmare began, when Tom Rivera stopped by. "Franklin, I wanted to thank you," he said. "Thank me for what?" "For standing up to Sharon. If you had not fought back when she tried to build that guardhouse on your land, who knows how long her theft would have continued. You exposed what was really going on. I was just protecting my property. Maybe, but you did the whole community a service. The neighborhood is a much better place now." After Tom left, I walked out to the vacant lot where the guardhouse had briefly stood. The desert plants were thriving, and I could see a roadrunner darting between the kala cactus in the fading light. Everything was exactly as it should be. I thought about everything that had happened over the past year. The anger, the stress, the legal battles, and ultimately, the vindication. It had been exhausting, but I had learned important lessons about standing up for what is right, even when it is difficult. I also realized that I had misjudged HOAs to some extent. The problem was not the concept of a homeowners association itself, but rather what happens when the wrong people get control and homeowners do not pay attention. The new board proved that an HOA could function properly with the right leadership and accountability. As fall arrived, I received a final check from the HOA for $12,000. This was compensation for my legal fees and the time I had spent dealing with the guardhouse mess. The board had voted to pay it from the funds they had managed to recover from the Kempers. I had not asked for this compensation, but I appreciated the gesture. It felt like the final chapter closing on a very long and difficult story. In November, I attended the annual HOA meeting, which was now well attended by engaged homeowners. Tom gave a presentation on the association's finances, which were finally back on solid footing. He also announced that the board had voted to reduce monthly HOA fees by 15% now, that they were not being stolen blind. During the open forum section, a newer resident who had moved in after the scandal asked what the empty slab was that they had noticed in some old neighborhood photos. Tom looked at me and raised an eyebrow, asking silently if I wanted to tell the story. I shook my head slightly. Some things were better left in the past. "That was a guardhouse project that was started but never completed," Tom said diplomatically. "We decided it was not necessary for the community." After the meeting, Carol caught up with me in the parking lot. "You are being very gracious about the whole thing," she said. "What do you mean? You could have made a bigger deal about what Sharon did to you specifically. You could have sued for emotional distress or whatever, but you have barely mentioned it." I shrugged. "She is in prison, the land is restored, I got compensated for my expenses. What more is there to do? Holding on to anger just hurts me, not her." "That is very mature of you." "I don't know about mature. I am just tired of thinking about it." Christmas came and went, and then we were into a new year. On the anniversary of Judge Hsu's final ruling ordering the guardhouse to be removed, I received a letter from the Arizona Department of Real Estate. It was a formal notice that their investigation was closed, and that the Saguaro Ridge HOA had been found in compliance with all state regulations following the board changes and policy reforms. The letter also noted that Sharon Kemper had been permanently banned from serving on any HOA board in Arizona, and her real estate license, which she had used to gain credibility in the community, had been revoked. I filed the letter away with all the other documents from the case. I had kept meticulous records of everything, partly out of habit and partly because I thought there might be value in having a complete accounting of what had happened, In March, a reporter from the Arizona Republic contacted me. They were doing a story on HOA abuse and had learned about the Saguaro Ridge case through public records. They wanted to interview me. I agreed, figuring that sharing my experience might help other homeowners who found themselves in similar situations. The resulting article, published in April, was fair and accurate. It detailed Sharon's crimes but also highlighted how the community had come together to fix the problems. The article generated a lot of interest. I received emails from people all over Arizona, and even some from other states, thanking me for speaking out and asking for advice on dealing with their own HOA issues. I found myself becoming something of an accidental advocate for HOA reform. I testified before the Arizona legislature in support of a bill that would increase oversight of HOA boards and make financial records more accessible to homeowners. The bill eventually passed, and the governor signed it into law in June. Through all of this, life went on. I continued working as a software engineer, doing my job remotely from my home office. The view from my desk looked out over the restored vacant lot, and I found it peaceful to watch the desert wildlife going about their business. In August, Tom Rivera decided not to run for re-election as HOA president. He had done an excellent job rebuilding trust and reforming the association, but he was ready to step back and let someone else take the reins. A woman named Deanna Foster was elected as the new president. She was younger than Tom, maybe in her late 30s, and brought a fresh energy to the role. One of her first initiatives was to create a welcome committee for new residents to help them understand how the HOA worked and encourage participation. I volunteered to be on the committee, figuring that my experience gave me valuable perspective on why homeowner engagement mattered. In October, I was at the hardware store in Gilbert when I ran into Jennifer Walsh, the attorney who had briefly represented the HOA during the transition period. "Franklin, how are you?" she asked. "Doing well. How about you?" "Busy as always. I wanted to tell you the Kemper case became something of a teaching example in HOA law circles. I have used it in several presentations about the importance of proper governance and oversight. Glad something positive came out of it. You know, what you did took real courage. A lot of people would have just given up when faced with that kind of harassment." "I don't know if it was courage or just stubbornness," I said. I really could not stand the idea of letting her get away with it. "Well, whatever it was, you did the right thing." As November arrived, I found myself reflecting on the 2 years since the Guardhouse incident had begun. It felt like ancient history now, even though it had not been that long. The neighborhood was thriving under competent leadership. Property values had actually increased, and there was a genuine sense of community that had not existed before. I realized that in a strange way, Sharon's attempted power grab had made the neighborhood stronger. It had forced people to pay attention and get involved. The new generation of HOA leadership was transparent, accountable, and actually interested in serving the community rather than enriching themselves. One Saturday afternoon in December, I was out working in my yard when a car pulled up. A man in his 60s got out and approached me. "Are you Franklin Vance?" he asked. "That is me." "My name is Robert Garrison. I live over in the Desert Vista neighborhood about 3 miles from here. Our HOA is having problems similar to what happened here, and I was hoping to ask your advice." I invited him in, and we talked for over an hour. His HOA president was abusing power and making decisions without board approval, and homeowners felt helpless to stop it. I walked him through everything I had learned. Document everything. Know your rights under Arizona HOA law. Attend every board meeting. Build support among other homeowners. and do not be afraid to take legal action if necessary. The key thing to remember, I told him, is that HOA board members work for the homeowners, not the other way around. They are not dictators. If enough people stand up and demand accountability, change is possible. Robert left with renewed determination, and I felt good about being able to help. Over the next few months, I heard from him periodically. The Desert Vista homeowners had started attending meetings in force, asking tough questions, and demanding transparency. Their rogue board president eventually resigned under pressure. As spring returned to Arizona and the desert bloomed with colorful wildflowers, I took stock of where things stood. My property was fully restored and looked better than ever. The HOA was functioning well under competent leadership. Sharon and Gerald Kemper were serving their prison sentences, with Sharon not eligible for parole until she had served at least 5 years. The financial damage to the association had been significant, but the community had recovered. The recovered funds from the Kempers, combined with more careful budgeting, had allowed the HOA to build back its reserves and even fund some improvements that homeowners actually wanted. In May, the neighborhood held its first annual community picnic at the park area near the clubhouse. Over 300 residents attended, including several new families who had moved in recently. The turnout was a testament to the renewed sense of community. I found myself talking with a young couple who had just bought a house on Cactus Wren Court. They had heard about the neighborhood's troubles and recovery, and it had actually made them more interested in buying here. We figured that any community that could come together and fix a problem like that was a place we wanted to live, the husband said. Plus, we read all about the reforms to the HOA structure, his wife added. It seems like there is real accountability now. They were right. The reformed bylaws included term limits for board members, mandatory financial audits, and requirements for homeowner approval of any expenditure over $5,000. The board also had to publish detailed financial statements quarterly, available on the HOA website for anyone to review. These changes had become a model that other Arizona HOAs were adopting. The state HOA reform law that I had testified for included provisions encouraging these types of best practices. As summer arrived and temperatures climbed into the triple digits, I spent more time inside working and less time worrying about HOA politics. I had done my part, and now it was time to let others carry the torch. In July, I received an unexpected piece of mail. It was a letter from Gerald Kemper, postmarked from the state prison in Florence. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity got the better of me. The letter was an apology. Gerald wrote that he had spent his time in prison reflecting on his actions and realized how much damage he and Sharon had done. He acknowledged his role in the Guardhouse scheme and other fraudulent activities. He did not make excuses or try to shift blame. I know this letter cannot undo the harm we caused you and the other homeowners, he wrote, but I wanted you to know that I am genuinely sorry. I let Sharon's ambition and greed corrupt me, and I failed to do the right thing. That is on me. When I get out, I plan to make amends however I can, starting with full restitution to the HOA. I read the letter twice, trying to gauge if it was sincere. It was hard to say. People in prison often find religion or claim rehabilitation, but there was something about the tone that seemed genuine. I wrote back a brief response, acknowledging his apology and wishing him luck with his rehabilitation. I did not say I forgave him, because I was not sure I did, but I also did not see the point in holding on to anger towards someone who seemed to be genuinely trying to change. Sharon, on the other hand, had reportedly been a difficult prisoner, constantly complaining about her treatment and insisting she was innocent despite the conviction. She had filed multiple appeals, all of which had been rejected. It seemed she would never accept responsibility for what she had done. August arrived again, marking 3 full years since the Guardhouse incident had begun. I decided to host a small barbecue for some of my neighbors, including Tom Rivera and his family, Carol from next door, and Deanna Foster, the current HOA president. We sat on my back patio as the sun set, talking and laughing about nothing in particular. At one point, Tom raised his beer. "A toast," he said, "to Franklin for having the guts to fight back when the rest of us were too complacent to notice what was happening." "And to all of you," I replied, "for stepping up when it mattered and actually fixing the problems instead of just complaining about them." We clinked glasses and bottles, and I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for a long time. The battle was truly over, and we had won not just a legal victory but something more important. We had built a real community. As September rolled around, life settled into a comfortable routine. I worked. I socialized with neighbors. I attended the occasional HOA meeting when there was something important to discuss. The drama and stress of the previous years felt like a distant memory. One afternoon, I was pulling weeds from around the native plants on the restored vacant lot when a thought struck me. The land where the guardhouse had briefly stood was now the most beautiful part of my property. The restoration company had done such a good job that it looked like a curated desert garden, complete with a variety of cacti, wildflowers, and small trees that provided habitat for birds and other wildlife. In a way, Sharon's terrible decision to build on my land had led to something better than what had been there before. The forced restoration had created something special. There was probably a metaphor in there somewhere about how we grow from adversity, but I did not dwell on it too much. I was just happy with how things had turned out. In October, I attended a regional HOA conference in Phoenix, where I had been invited to speak on a panel about homeowner rights and HOA accountability. The room was packed with people from communities across Arizona who were dealing with various HOA issues. During the question and answer session, someone asked me what advice I would give to homeowners facing abusive HOAs. "First, know your rights," I said. "Arizona has good laws protecting homeowners, but you have to understand them to use them. Second, document everything in writing with dates and photos. Third, do not be afraid to get legal help early. I tried to handle things myself at first, but having an attorney made all the difference. And finally, remember that you are not alone. Most of your neighbors probably feel the same way you do. Find allies and work together." Another person asked if I regretted buying a house in an HOA community. "Honestly, no," I said. "I think HOAs can serve a valuable purpose when they are run properly. The problem is not the concept. It is when board members forget they are volunteers serving their community and start acting like rulers of a little kingdom. With the right leadership and engaged homeowners, an HOA can actually enhance quality of life." After the conference, several people came up to thank me for sharing my experience. A few asked if I would be willing to consult with their communities, but I declined. I had done my part, and I did not want to become a professional HOA crusader. November brought cooler weather and the holiday season. The neighborhood looked festive with lights and decorations, and the HOA organized a community-wide decoration contest that was actually fun rather than the excuse for citations that it had been under Sharon's reign. On Thanksgiving, I invited some neighbors who did not have family nearby to join me for dinner. It was a small gathering, but it felt warm and genuine. We talked about what we were grateful for, and I found myself thinking about how much my life had improved since the Guardhouse battle had ended. Yes, it had been stressful and expensive and time-consuming, but it had also connected me to my community in a way that might not have happened otherwise. I knew my neighbors now. I understood how local governance worked. I had learned valuable lessons about standing up for what is right. December brought the annual HOA meeting, which was again well attended. Deanna Foster gave an excellent presentation on the year's activities and finances. The association was in the black, with healthy reserves and no outstanding legal issues. During the meeting, someone proposed creating a permanent committee focused on HOA education and outreach to help new homeowners understand their rights and responsibilities. The motion passed unanimously, and I agreed to serve on the committee. As the meeting wrapped up, Deanna pulled me aside. "Franklin, I want to thank you for everything you have done for this community. I know the past few years have been difficult for you, but your willingness to fight back against Sharon really saved this neighborhood. I appreciate that, but I was just defending my property. You and Tom and the others are the ones who actually fixed the systemic problems. Maybe, but you showed everyone that it was possible to stand up to her. That mattered." As I drove home that night, I thought about the journey I had been on. From that shocking morning when I woke up to construction equipment on my land, through the legal battles and harassment, to the ultimate victory and reform, it had been quite a ride. The demolished guardhouse had become a symbol of sorts. It represented the dangers of unchecked power and the importance of accountability. But more than that, it represented the community's willingness to confront problems and make real changes. As winter settled over Gilbert and 2026 began, I found myself looking forward rather than backward. The guardhouse incident was history, an important chapter in the neighborhood's story, but no longer the defining narrative. I had plans for the coming year that had nothing to do with HOAs or legal battles. I was thinking about taking a vacation, maybe visiting national parks in Utah. I was considering adopting a dog, now that I was home most days working remotely. I wanted to spend more time on my hobbies and less time on neighborhood drama. But I also knew that I would remain engaged with the HOA, because I had learned the hard way what happens when good people check out and leave governance to those who abuse power. The price of a well-functioning community is eternal vigilance, or at least occasional attendance at board meetings. One evening in late January, I was sitting on my back patio enjoying the mild winter weather when Carol stopped by with a bottle of wine. "I thought you might want to celebrate," she said. "Celebrate what?" "I just heard through the grapevine that Sharon's final appeal was denied. Her conviction is final, and she will be serving the full 7 years unless she earns good behavior credits, which seems unlikely given what I have heard about her time in prison." We poured glasses of wine and sat quietly for a moment. "You know what is funny?" I said. "I do not feel triumphant or vindicated or any of those things I thought I would feel. I just feel relieved that it is really over." "That is probably healthy," Carol said. "Holding on to anger would just hurt you. Sharon destroyed her own life through greed and arrogance. She had everything a person could want: a nice house, financial security, respect in the community. And she threw it all away because she could not resist stealing from her neighbors." "Some people are never satisfied," Carol agreed. We sat and watched the sun set over the desert, the sky turning brilliant shades of orange and purple. The vacant lot beside my house was quiet and peaceful, home to quail and rabbits and the occasional coyote passing through. It was exactly as it should be, as it always should have been. The guardhouse that Sharon had tried to build was gone, demolished and removed, as if it had never existed. But its brief existence had changed everything. exposing corruption and forcing reform. In the end, her attempt to misuse HOA power for personal gain had backfired spectacularly, resulting in her imprisonment and permanent changes that made future abuse much harder. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, I realized that I had finally made peace with everything that had happened. The anger was gone, replaced by satisfaction that justice had been served and the community had emerged stronger. The demolished guardhouse had taught me important lessons about property rights, standing up for principles, and the importance of community engagement. It had been an expensive education in many ways, but one I would not trade. I had discovered reserves of courage and determination I had not known I possessed. More importantly, I had learned that ordinary people, when they work together and refuse to be intimidated, can overcome even entrenched corruption and abuse of power. That was a lesson worth learning, and one I hoped would stick with everyone in the neighborhood for years to come. As winter gave way to early spring, bringing warm sunshine and blooming wildflowers back to the Arizona desert, I felt genuinely optimistic about the future. The nightmare of the guardhouse incident was truly behind us all now, relegated to history and cautionary tale status. Life was good, the neighborhood was thriving, and my property was restored and beautiful. Sometimes I would stand on that vacant lot and imagine what it would have looked like with Sharon's guardhouse squatting there, an ugly monument to corruption and overreach. Then I would look at what was actually there: native plants thriving, wildlife flourishing, open space preserved. The contrast could not have been starker. In the end, I had won more than just a legal battle. I had helped save a community from itself, protected my property rights, and sent a message that HOA boards serve at the pleasure of homeowners, not the other way around. The demolished guardhouse, which no longer existed except in photographs and legal documents, had become the foundation for something much better. A neighborhood governed by transparency, accountability, and genuine community spirit. That was worth far more than any guardhouse could ever have been, and I was grateful for the outcome, despite the difficult journey to get there.